This is another second in a short series of reflections on reducing stress and work stress in our lives, written around my 83rd birthday and the winter solstice 2024. This next bit of lifemanship, if you like, is that we are presented with many decisions and problems and things to solve, which are puzzling and can't be easily dealt with. And so what I've developed through my life is a number of virtual and actual pending trays. So, as one philosopher put it, a great invention of modern times is the suspended judgment. So, early on in my life, I got a filing system with 3 trays: in, middling, the pending, and out. And the pending one is really important. Very often, when I get messages or requests or things I need to deal with, I put them in the pending tray because I don't quite know how to deal with them as yet, and I realize they may take some time. So I do this with emails now with my Outlook system, which allows me to pin them and just put them at the top and think about them and deal with them later and not lose them. And I do them with my pending tray and in my mind, or write them down on a sheet of paper and consider them. This has 2 advantages. One is that your mind is working on these problems invisibly, and often when you come back to them, you can see a solution a day or 2 later which you wouldn't have seen immediately. And the second is that often, strangely, in the middle pending tray, for example, I pick out these awkward and slightly difficult things, and they've, as it were, decomposed and gone away. The crisis has passed, it's no longer necessary to deal with them, so I move them down into the out tray. And about half of the things I would have had to immediately respond to have gone. So the pending tray is extremely helpful. The next thing to think about is distractions. This is really a vast subject and has increased since I last thought about it. The advice I give myself, but not always take it of course, is to concentrate on one thing at a time. One of the difficulties is that we have so many stimulants. Many of those who live in affluent societies have food, drink, company, television, mobile phones, books, much else. And one is consuming all these things. It's very tempting to feel that your happiness will be increased by consuming on the maximum number of levels. So you're half watching the television, half listening to some music, half, well, you can't be half, but you're also trying to read an article in something you've come across, you're eating something, 4 or 5 or 6 different sensory impressions. And human beings, these aren't additive. One doesn't increase the other. In fact, it distracts and detracts from the other. So when I, in the evening, as I do, listen to classical music for half an hour or so every evening, I make sure that I'm not doing anything else but just listening and watching the classical music. Same when obviously reading, same when you're talking to a friend. It's hopeless if you're also half looking at your mobile phone or flicking your eyes around at other things. So concentrate on the thing that you are enjoying and put all the other things to one side. Now that bit of advice has obviously hugely been increased in importance in relation to something which wasn't present when I last talked about this or wrote about this, and that is the mobile phone, the cell phone, which is a constant source of distraction. I find it almost addictive in that I have to fight against the temptation. I put my mobile phone away from me for most of the day, but if it's anywhere near me, I'm after a half an hour or an hour, I feel this huge pressure to go and see if there's anything new and interesting in the way of emails. Now, I don't use all the games and all the other apps that most people do, and one can see how really addictive it is, and no doubt fun and interesting, but it adds to this pressure of distraction more and more. The last of the three things I'll mention in the second reflection is some advice which I particularly pinned down on the philosopher Descartes. One of his methods of thought, which was very valuable to me, was the idea that when you're trying to solve any kind of problem, it often seems insuperable because it is a big problem. And one way to deal with that is to break it into bits. And when you've broken it into bits, each bit is easier to solve, and you should start with what is the easiest and most soluble of the parts of the puzzle or problem. You do that, of course, with jigsaw puzzles. You do the edges, which are easier because one side is flat, and then you move on to the easier colors, and then so on. And we do this all through our lives, but it's a good formal method. When I'm trying to write a complicated piece of work, I get a sheet of paper and I break it into the parts with arrows between which is going to go to where, and then I start. You don't have to start with the beginning or the ending or anywhere. Take the easiest bit, start with the easy part, and then that will give you confidence, and then you move on to another. So that's the last bit of advice here.